continual growth of drug usage in the world today is becoming more and more evident. The word drug relates to many different substances. Some of these substances include prescription medication, marijuana, and heroin. The drug that has been not only addicting many, but also killing is heroin. This increase in heroin is not only in faraway countries, but it's also in the United States. The heroin epidemic has even struck the Mahoning Valley, our hometown area. In order to understand this continual growth in the usage of heroin, we must inspect the significant factors that play a role in it. The laws of heroin usage, the history of heroin usage, and the reasons of heroin usage are all factors to examine when trying to solve this heroin epidemic. The solutions to drug-related epidemics are not simple due to all of the contrasting factors.
Hello, my name is Taylor Crowder, and I'm going to be talking about the history of the heroin epidemic. Then and now, to this day, heroin still remains one of the number one sought out, most bought drug on the street. When I was doing the research for this, I came up on a study that happened, I want to say in like 2009 or so, that you can walk in any direction going any place, less than 2 minutes away from you, and still be able to find 4 or 5 or more places that had heroin. That's how close you are to people that are either doing heroin, selling heroin, or anything like that, and that's crazy. When I was also reading this case study, I learned that more than 50% of people back then died from overdoses of heroin, and that's just so sad. And just to think it's gotten worse since this case study. They rated our region on a scale of 1 to 10, and 10 obviously being the most popular region for heroin and 1 not, that we were a 10. And we've been a 10 for years before this study was done. They said that heroin is the number 1 drug of choice. Back then, the most popular kind of heroin, which there are many different kinds of heroin, was the brown powdered heroin. I have no idea if that's still the most popular kind, but that was the most popular kind back then. It's just sad to see people throw away their lives just for drugs. That's all I really have on the history of it. Thank you guys.
Heroin is the most dangerous and highly addictive drug and is treated as a very serious matter in the Ohio criminal justice system. If you are charged with possessing any amount, you can face felony charges and a permanent record. An offense in drug trafficking can be a wide array of controlled substance violations, including selling, intent to sell, distributing, manufacturing, or cultivating. The law says that drug trafficking is either selling or offering to sell a controlled substance or preparing a controlled substance for shipment, delivery, transport, or distribution. You can face a range of charges from misdemeanors to first-degree felonies, depending on the substance, the amount, and the area where you were caught with the substance. Heroin is classified as a Schedule I drug, which is included with the most dangerous and has the highest risk of addiction or dependency. These drugs have no legitimate medical use. Other drugs in this classification are LSD and ecstasy. Each controlled substance is categorized under Ohio law as having a bulk amount. Each drug has a different bulk amount that dictates the charge and potential sentence with each violation. Having heroin is an automatic felony. Up to 1 gram is a 5th-degree felony, with sentences of up to 12 months in jail and fines of $2,500. Or 250 grams or more can get you 3 to 10 years in prison and $20,000 in fines. Not all heroin possession cases result in a prison term, partially because most cases end in a plea agreement. The state of Ohio also has drug courts that serve as an alternative to traditional courts, which require defendants to go through a period of intense supervision, much like probation. These participants also are required to take part in treatment and other rehabilitative programs in order to succeed. Heroin trafficking violations do not give you the option of going to drug court, though. Depending on the specifics of the individual case, the defendant could be facing federal prosecution as well. There are many reasons one might take part in using drugs. Fitting in with a crowd, coping with trauma, just the sheer thrill of doing something that is frowned upon in society, just to name a few. From psychological to physiological, I plan to highlight some of the key factors that influence a person's decision to use drugs. The first reason that may come to mind when discussing drug use would probably be peer pressure. The desire to fit in with a crowd and seem cool are major factors in influencing one's decision-making in any social situation, and drug use is no different. Others may do it for their own individual transformation, the release of stress, or simply for the thrill of doing something that is deemed wrong. Taking part in doing drugs and developing an addiction is not always a conscious choice, however. Some people are born into a culture and lifestyle of drug use through a genetic predisposition to addiction and drug use or a chemical imbalance in the brain due to a family history of drug use and addiction. The primary focus of this speech is drug use, specifically heroin, in the Valley, our very own hometown. The availability of drugs like heroin in our hometown is a big factor in this epidemic. If drugs are made available and exposed to a greater population, people are bound to take part in doing them. One could argue that there is also little to do to preoccupy one's time in the Youngstown area, and a lack of stimulation also leads to using drugs as an alternative way of having fun. Another cause of drug use, also quite possibly related to the Youngstown area, includes socioeconomic and environmental factors. Things like economic status or income, social status, unemployment, geographic location, and culture all have major roles in the epidemic of heroin use in the Youngstown area. Some reasons for drug use can seem minuscule or frivolous, but to drug users they are making the decision with a purpose. Such reasons include weight loss, self-medication for physical or mental illness, or simply having the focus and energy to do work or study. Another thought drug users may have is that of a self-serving bias that one time couldn't hurt or nothing bad could possibly happen to me. As stated before, there is a vast range of reasons a person would turn to drugs. This does not excuse drug use, nor does it condemn it. This is a serious problem in our hometown and needs to be dealt with through alternative methods such as rehabilitation and therapy rather than jail time for users. Dealing with an addiction at its source, the mind, is the most effective way to ensure the general health and well-being of the population of users and addicts.
Hello, my name is Dakota Baez, and I'm going to be talking about why the current solutions aren't working on solving the Valley's heroin epidemic. Right now, the current solution that seems to be the major key in the Valley is to supply the police and other administrators with the naloxone that reverses the effects of the heroin. But this is just a life-saving tool, and it's not really actually stopping the heroin usage. Also, the other solution they have in the Valley is that they place hard drug users as victims and not really criminals, while they place other drug offenders as criminals and just make it seem easier to get away with hard drug abuse. And lastly, the other overall solution in the Valley is the heroin epidemic isn't really talked about that much, and we just don't really have a solution to it. One thing we lack is information. It's key to people knowing a lot about the problem, and it gets people to know the effects, and they're less likely to use when they have knowledge about it. And also a lack of treatment centers. We have very few treatment centers in the area, and they are very poor when it comes to ratings, and they're also very expensive. So overall, we just need some more education in the Valley and some more treatment centers and more people to actually talk about the problem at hand instead of just pushing it aside like it's nothing.
Now that everyone is a bit more familiar with the reasonings for usage, history, and laws regarding the heroin epidemic in Mahoning Valley, let's briefly discuss some solutions that could help prevent and or eliminate the epidemic. Heroin is no longer reserved for just junkies and prostitutes. It's now impacting nearly every sector within society. Measures have to be put in place for reform to transpire. Reform starts with educating our youth in-house and at schools at a much younger age. Within doing so, we're hoping to lessen the chance of experimentation at an older age. Making counseling and therapy more readily available to all individuals regardless of social and financial status is another solution that could be put in place to help reform the heroin epidemic. While some drug habits are formed from pain medication or curiosity, there is a tremendous amount that is associated with distorted thinking. So we're hoping by making these services available to individuals, we can lessen the chance of them choosing to use drugs as an escape from their reality, and instead embrace upon counseling and therapy sessions that are available. Lastly, society must stop relying solely on the criminal justice system to put an end to this epidemic. This is a public health issue as well. Drug treatment programs should be a priority in our communities, and lower income individuals should receive the same top care as those with higher wages.
Okay, so to pretty much wrap up everything that we covered in this speech, we talked about the history, why it's a problem, why it continues to be a problem, and how the problem started. We talked about the laws we have in place now, why they're not working, why nothing we're really doing at all is working. And then lastly, we kind of offered solutions, our opinions as to why we should, like what we should be doing, how we should be educating ourselves on this more, how we should be educating each other. We shouldn't just be relying on law enforcement and organizations to do this. We should take this upon ourselves to inform everybody and let the people who are being affected by this drug know that we're here to help them and not just going to tell the police on them, get them arrested, even though that might be the best thing for them. We want them to know that there are treatment centers, there are areas where they can go to be helped. So that pretty much wraps up our speech. Thank you very much.